We resume our studies of Mark's Good News with a short passage in chapter 10, verses 13 to 16, where Mark tells us the following story. People were bringing little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them, but the disciples rebuked them. When Jesus saw this, he was indignant. He said to them, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." And he took the children in his arms, placed his hands on them, and blessed them. Now we've already noticed that Mark does not always describe Jesus' ministry in strict chronological order. However, it's probable that these events occurred while Jesus was still across the Jordan, as the first verse of the present chapter notes. At the same time, we can also detect a natural link between this and the preceding passage. There the sanctity of marriage was discussed. Here attention is drawn to children and young people. It is an almost universal practice for parents or other family members to bring children forward for a blessing, often to a priest or someone similar, when they are young. So the practice described here remains popular in many cultures and places today. A prayerful benediction from those who are thought in some way close to God is sought for the child. Given the reputation that Jesus was gaining as a holy person, it was therefore natural that people were constantly seeking out Jesus, and especially to bless their children. Jesus' popularity is actually emphasized by Mark. He tells us the people were continually bringing children to him. However, at the time that Jesus lived, and indeed often today, children were marginalized. Grown-ups, as we might call them, were far more important, and as a result, children were given little time or attention. It was therefore completely understandable that Jesus' disciples sought to protect Jesus in order that he could devote himself to his real ministry, as they supposed it to be. What this passage indicates is that the disciples, and we after them if we're interested in following Jesus, the disciples needed to grasp that they were still thinking in terms of everyday values, the values of their environment and culture, and not those of their God. Simply by his response in this passage, Jesus suggests that two things are paramount to our worldview as his disciples: our attitude toward God and our actions towards others. And we will look at each of these in turn. When Jesus says the kingdom of God belongs to such as these children, he's not referring to childish innocence. All those of us who know children or remember our own childhood do not need persuading that there is no such thing as an innocent child. Even the smallest child doesn't seem to need to learn to be naughty. But there are two things about children that are endearing. One is their wide-eyed wonder at everything around them. The second, their humble dependence and confidence on those around them to supply their needs and to be simply there to share their little joys and their little sorrows, to pick them up and support them when they fall or are in trouble. It would appear that this is the point of Jesus' comparison. If we're to be his followers, we too need to live daily in the knowledge that, small and insignificant as we are, and prone to failure and sin, his arms are ready to enfold us and surround us with such undeserved blessings as should make us wide-eyed too. Wide-eyed at the amazing grace revealed to us in Jesus, the incarnate God. But this passage also reminds us that the true follower of Jesus will be someone who, like Jesus, cares for everyone, even the most marginalized. Jesus always seemed to find time for those that society had left out. Here, as we see, it was children. And there is something rather charming about the story here. The disciples were ready to push those with babes in arms and tots to the back of the queue of those who wanted to spend time with Jesus, but Jesus' reaction was stark. Mark tells us that he rebuked them. This is strong language, and it probably stung. But the attitude of the disciples was so out of line with that of Jesus that it needed to be made. So let's remind ourselves of Jesus' response. Mark tells us he was indignant. He said to the disciples, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." And he took the children in his arms, placed his hands on them, and blessed them. What is striking is both Jesus' insistence that children had a significant place in his life and ministry, and also the fervent way in which he blessed them, giving each of them time and a cuddle before he prayed for them. I think the greatness of Jesus is seen in this lovely short story. Amid all the other demands on his time and energy, he almost seemed to prioritize the weakest and the vulnerable, and not out of any sense of duty, but because he delighted in them. As we come to the end of this shorter study, we're brought face to face with God in the person of Jesus, who is lovely, lovable, and loving, and expects us to be the same. His love, of course, was, so Mark implies, extended to those who scarcely deserved his attention, sinful nobodies. No wonder then the awe and wonder, delight and praise, love and service that was theirs and should be ours. But both the lessons of this section are difficult. To get our attitudes to God and those around us correct is no easy matter. Both points are radical. Each of us who wish to follow Jesus will take a lifetime to learn and apply them. The disciples had not grasped this after 3 years in the intimate company of the supremest teacher and example of all. And the reason for this is that it runs so against worldly standards, where the pursuit of aims, objectives, goals, ambitions is so often a cloak for selfish advancement, greed, and the supreme sin, pride. Jesus, however, commends time wasted among the weak, vulnerable, marginalized, disadvantaged. It is this that he notices, and it is his self-giving and self-denial. It is this self-giving and self-denial he honors. The Christian tradition at its best has always honored and promoted loving humility as the supreme of Christian virtues. It is the meek who will inherit the earth. How then do we match up?